Hello there, and welcome to another Bo&Joe podcast. I'm Bo.
I'm Joe.
And today we have a special guest with us who has some rather interesting tales to tell.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to call her Carol Ann.
Carol Ann.
Carol Ann.
Carol Ann.
The nature of her stories are going to be relevant to that name, and we think it fits pretty good.
Yep.
So, Carol Ann, thank you for joining us tonight.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Now, Joe, I'm going to let you have the first question.
All right. So, the nature of the stories tonight are going to revolve around the paranormal, right?
Yes.
So, if you wouldn't mind, what is the most, I wouldn't say prolific, but memorable paranormal experience you've ever had?
There's a lot. I think one of the ones that scared me the most happened when I was in school. I had been asleep and I woke up from a deep sleep because I really don't know why I woke up. I just suddenly came awake, completely awake, and I saw what appeared to be an old woman standing over me.
Was she fully formed?
Yes.
So you could see facial details and everything?
Yes, she was an elderly woman. She had no teeth.
Whoa.
Her hair was scraggly. She resembled, the best word I could use for her would be like hag. When you think of a depiction of a hag or even a banshee almost.
Now you said you were young. How young were you?
Well, I can't say too young. This was...
We're talking about 7 or 8?
No.
Was it high school?
No. Let's try college. It was more... I was in my late 20s.
Okay, well that's still,
That's
still young.
Yeah.
I'm an older guy.
Yeah, we're
Youngish.
both old.
And I remember she had no teeth. Her mouth was hanging wide open. And she was just staring at me.
Okay.
And she had what looked like a regular nightgown on. Nothing fancy, nothing weird, no rags or anything.
Okay.
And she just stared down at me, and her eyes were wide open, completely wide. Like you could see all the way around. There were just all the whites around her eyes.
Could you see her feet?
No, I could not see her feet, but I was laying on the mattress and I wasn't looking down.
Right.
All I could do was look up. I was on my back.
Okay.
And she made this horrible sound, and I proceeded to fling myself out of the bed.
Wow.
And I actually ended up on the far side of the room. And we had hardwood floors then, and I landed on both my knees and hit the wall.
Okay.
My mom, she had come running in. She's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? What are you doing over here on the floor?" And I told her what had happened, and I guess when I jumped out of bed, I flew through this woman. I don't know. I just reacted.
Okay.
It was just, there was no thinking. But it left me with knee injuries.
Oh, wow.
So I limped around at work for a couple of days after that one.
Wow.
That was not fun.
Was that your first encounter?
With her?
No, just in general.
No. That was just one of the ones that I remember the best because it hurt the most.
Wow.
Now, I asked because I'm curious too. Joe knows that I am not a believer in the afterlife or anything like that.
Yep.
But I am fascinated to hear from people who've had these experiences. And I always ask this question, is it possible, and this by no means means anything you experienced, like you clearly... Watching you tell the tale, you clearly experienced something. Is it possible that this is a dream or a nightmare?
I mean, it's always possible, I guess. I'm no expert on the matter. I just have my personal experiences, and they've happened to me throughout my life under various circumstances, whether I've been completely awake from the start or I woke up from being asleep. I don't really know. I guess it's always possible.
Well, one quick question in regards to that story, kind of delving away. Was there ever a smell? Like, have you ever...
That's a good question.
Not that I noticed. I suddenly came awake and there was this person I don't know standing over me. And I didn't think about a smell or...
Okay.
It was just immediate terror and escape.
But you've
really.
But you've more than one sense was affected, right? Because you said you heard something, and as well as seeing it.
I did hear and I saw.
Okay.
but
It's never...
dreams can be vivid. But
well, no. I'm not saying it's a dream. I'm just saying let's just take out the dream completely.
Okay.
And say it's 100% something in the physical realm.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when you think about these situations, people sometimes when they're around these types of paranormal situations, they claim that they can either have a specific sort of smell, depending on the situation. Sometimes it's a very like a rotten eggs type of smell, which is attributed to sulfur,
Sure.
And things like that. So that's why I asked. I just was curious,
I didn't notice one, but I wasn't really thinking about it either.
Okay,
It was just sudden awareness of being awake and I'm out of the bed.
Okay.
So that's a pretty horrific visage that you just described. This old woman. You said, was she at the foot of the bed or the side of the bed?
She was standing right next to me. She was not at the foot.
So she's at the side of the bed. You said her jaw was hanging open, her eyes were open wide. And like, to me, I think that's pretty much nightmare fuel for a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Are you a reader of books, scary books like Stephen King or Clive Owen?
No, actually.
Clive Barker. That's the guy. Sorry.
No, I try not to read scary stuff, and especially not before bed, even if I did, because I don't want to have dreams or be kept up with horrific types. Yeah.
Okay. So the old lady, that's the most memorable, you said.
That's the one that sticks out the most just because it hurt so much. I don't know how I managed to... say I was asleep. Say I was completely asleep the entire time. I mean, I'm wondering how much physical force needs to be exerted to overcome sleep paralysis.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I completely launched myself out of the bed and across the room. So I don't have an explanation for that.
So that's a good question to segue to. Have you ever experienced sleep paralysis?
Well, not in the sense where people say where they wake up and suddenly they're paralyzed and something horrible. I mean, everybody experiences it when they sleep just because it's your body's protective mechanism to keep you from acting out your dreams.
Right.
Okay.
And if you don't do that, then you actually have a sleep disorder, which they can test and treat for.
Okay.
But I've never been a sleepwalker.
Okay.
I've never done anything like that.
What about lucid dreams?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And how much do you dream, generally speaking?
I dream a lot. I
Okay.
dream a lot. And they're usually not great dreams. But I know that I'm asleep.
Okay.
When you say not great, what do you mean?
Oh, they're scary sometimes, but not in the ghosts and ghouls kind of sense. It's more the something happening to my family or horrible weather things like tornadoes, or I'm lost somewhere, usually.
So
or I'm drowning.
So you'd say then that your dreams are more often than not nightmares?
Yeah, I would say that. So I'm very aware of what seems real and what doesn't, because the bad dreams happen so frequently.
Okay. Now, for the listeners at home, Joe and I have known Carol Ann for a couple of years now.
Yep.
And we have heard some of the things that she's undergone in the last, since we've known her.
Right.
And we've heard a couple of snippets of the things that she's experienced in the past. And that's why we've asked her on tonight. We know that a lot of our listeners, through the stories they've told us or the stories that they've shared with other people, have similar experiences. And in fact, our very first ever Different Perspectives individual, Miss Pepper, she came on the show. I believe you know who Pepper is.
I do.
She told us that she saw, for better summary, I will say, she saw shadow people.
Yeah.
Shadow people.
Do you see shadow people?
I think I have before. And it's always at night for some reason. And
Is it out of the corner of your eye, or do you?
sometimes
Okay.
sometimes it's a very quick movement out of the corner of your eye. It always moves against the wall.
The corners.
The corners, like it's part of the wall. It's a shadow without anything being there to cast the shadow people.
Yeah.
So it's very much like it can go behind furniture, and it's just up against the wall, and it seems to just move so fast that you almost can't catch it sometimes, but sometimes you do.
You ever heard of H.P. Lovecraft? So H.P. Lovecraft has a story, The Dogs of... I can't remember the entire name. I'll make sure to include it either in the description or something. But he talks about... It's a extremely, extremely short story where there's this peculiar person who's a scientist who has claimed that he has found the ability to communicate with the other side. Well, and when he mentions the other side, he doesn't mean like a realm of depth. He means a dimension. And he specifies that he's able, when he goes into this situation, he sees people and they reside in corner. These shadow people.
That is weird.
And he specifically mentions that they always go for the corners.
Yeah, they go from corner to corner.
Yeah.
And between corners, they're just super fast. I've never felt anything threatening or menacing from these. And that hasn't been very frequent. But that's usually the one that I'll feel a little nervous, but I don't feel like it's something that could hurt me. Or is even aware that I'm there, really.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, that's another good segue. So the visions, you've had a lot of, and I'm calling them visions. You haven't called them that. But these visions that you've had, these things, and I'm going to say creatures, because I've heard you describe some of them. They're definitely not human. But these things, some of these things that you have seen, do you always get the feeling that they're malicious? Or do you sometimes, like, I imagine... In tonight's show, we're calling you Carol Ann after that young girl from the Poltergeist films, and she had this apparent gift where these beings sought her out to help them find the way to the light, as it were. Now, she wasn't threatened by most of them. Do you feel threatened by most of them, or some of them, or
some of them? Some absolutely not, like the shadow people. No, absolutely not. And certainly not from the one that looked just like my dad.
Oh, wow.
Tell us about that.
My dad died when I was 18 in the month of September. And that was very hard on everybody. He died very suddenly. And fast forward a couple of months around Christmas time. Again, I'm asleep. And I suddenly wake up because I'm aware someone is with me. And I always slept in my room alone. So the presence of someone I was definitely aware of.
Wow.
I woke up and I sat up in bed. And at the foot of my bed is my dad. And he's standing there and he's just looking at me. And he has the saddest expression on his face. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. We just sort of stared at each other. And then he, poof, just vanished.
Oh, wow. And you saw the vanish? You saw the vanishing?
I did. It wasn't like an instantaneous. It was more like a slow fade out.
Okay.
But it upset and alarmed me enough that I refused to sleep in my room for the next 2 weeks. I actually slept on the living room couch with the Christmas tree plugged in.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't want that to happen again. Not that it was so scary. Because I felt zero malice from it. It was just, it was unbelievably sad.
Right.
And,
I'm curious, why wouldn't you want to see your dad again? I mean, I understand the sad thing, but...
It was very raw, and I mean, I would love to see him again now, maybe not under those circumstances, but he just looked so sad, and I didn't want to see him looking so sad.
I mean, and I totally get that. Do you think maybe, if this really did happen, do you think maybe he was sad because he knew you were sad?
Probably, if that's the thing. Actually... My dad was cremated, and his ashes were split into 2 urns, one for me and one for my brother. Mine was in my room, and they say sometimes maybe they have attachments to things like that. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. But mine was in my room, and I moved it out of my room after that.
A quick question. Has anybody else in your family have had situations like that? Or
yes.
Is it,
Yep. My mother.
Okay.
She's experienced quite a few. We'll call them ghoulies.
Okay.
That's the
familiar
term.
term. Yeah.
All right.
And her grandmother, actually experienced things too, and she was totally cool with it. She said she had some. My I guess it would have been my great grandmother.
Did they call it the Shine?
The Shine. Nice.
Nope, she had.
And now we're gonna get sued for copyright.
Oh god.
Thanks, guys.
I had to, man.
Yeah.
No,
Sorry.
Got the Shine.
My mom would sometimes sleep over there when she was a kid, and my mom said one night she woke up and someone was jiggling the door handle.
Okay.
To the room she was sleeping in. And it freaked her out big time. She goes and yanks open the door, and there's nobody there. Nobody. And she goes back to bed. The next day, she's talking to her grandmother, my great-grandmother, about it. And she goes, "Oh, that's just such and such." I don't. She gave him a name. She named him herself, but I don't remember what the name was.
Wow.
She was convinced it was a male, and she gave him a name. We'll just say Marvin.
Okay.
And she says, "Oh, that's just Marvin. Don't worry about it. He likes to hang out, you know." And she was not fazed by it at all, ever.
So it runs deep in your family.
So it seems.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, and I'm sure our listeners are. Tell us another one of your stories. What is another memorable experience that you had?
There was a time several years ago, I would say maybe 6 years ago, that I, again, woke up from a deep sleep because of the presence of something in the room. And I sit up, and I'm looking around, and there in the bottom left-hand corner of the bed, I can see it through the window. The moonlight was shining through the window. There's this little thing. I can best describe it as almost like an imp.
Okay.
Or a little devil type thing with pointy ears.
Yeah.
And it was crouched on the end of my bed in that corner.
Interesting.
Oh, God. It was not interesting. No.
Yeah, the only reason I say interesting is because I've heard a similar story from our producer.
Oh, yeah?
Seriously. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
No, it was just crouched there, and it was facing me. I could see the outline of its body.
Yeah.
It was just crouched with its knees drawn up almost by its ears.
Oh, wow.
So
like a little gargoyle.
Yes, exactly
wow.
like that. That's how it was sitting.
Did it have a tail?
I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell that.
And again, no smells. So at any point in time in these situations, no
no
smells.
smell that I could remember.
Okay.
I just remember being so freaked out. I actually shrieked on this one really loud.
Wow.
And I lashed out really hard and kicked towards that end of the bed. And the comforter actually flew up off of me and over that corner of the bed.
Yeah?
Because I was trying to get whatever it was away from me. It's like there's some weird little animal on the bed.
Yeah.
And I want it gone. This thing I definitely felt malice from.
Okay.
The comforter flew up, and when it landed, I completely expected it to be, I don't know, maybe like a possum or something had crawled into the room.
Like
and
an animal that
an
you can
animal
see,
of
right,
some
right,
sort.
okay,
It's like
okay.
maybe I'm just seeing it wrong.
Right.
But when it fell, when the comforter fell, there was nothing there.
Wow.
It just vanished.
So,
And that was that fast.
from a psychological standpoint, after you've had one of these experiences, do you feel like after you've woken up, obviously you're going to feel adrenaline from the experience, but when it's all said and done, do you feel like somebody's trying to tell you something? Do you feel like you're hunted, or what are your thoughts after something like this?
I feel, honestly, the first thing that goes through my mind is not again. Just like, ugh.
Well, that's fair. I mean,
I'm tired of this. And just when I get comfortable, something else will happen.
that does seem to be your pattern.
I don't like it, and I'm unnerved for a long time afterwards. I have a hard time sleeping. I remember it very well, even years and years down the road. I can remember the circumstances. I can remember what I was wearing. I can remember just what other people were wearing.
Yeah.
Because I've never been alone in the house when any of these things have happened.
Okay.
There's always been other people
Curious.
in other rooms.
Okay.
And that's the thing, you think those things would only happen when you're alone in the house.
Exactly right. I was going to say.
But every time, almost without fail, let's see, I would say 95% of the time
Wow.
that I've had experiences, someone else has been in the house. Always. And usually multiple other people.
At any point have these things, again, your namesake was an individual that these we'll call them spirits for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
That your namesake, these spirits sought her out for help. Have any of these things that you've experienced, have they ever tried to directly communicate with you?
No, not that I've ever noticed. I've never had anything speak to me.
Well, but if we follow through from what you were saying, right? If we follow the process, then you don't want this to happen. So maybe the fact of you having that energy of no, not again, kind of blocks it from ever getting to a point of something would communicate with you. You know what I mean?
Even if it didn't, just my terror in the moment would prevent any sort of coherent type of conversation.
Okay.
Like it's immediate panic and escape, or completely freeze and hope that it doesn't see you, you know, kind of thing. And what typically happens, you know, I've moved a few times in my life,
Right.
and I'll move somewhere and everything's quiet. There's nothing going on.
Right.
For a long time. Months, even sometimes up to a year.
Okay.
Nothing will happen. And I'm like, finally!
Yeah.
I'm in a clean space.
Right.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And then little things will start to happen. Little noises or feelings, or and it progresses over time.
So I actually want to address that. That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. So again, your namesake for this conversation tonight, the name of that movie is Poltergeist. Now, Poltergeist, historically is a spirit that follows you, so it's not limited to a single area.
You never escape it.
Right. So what you've just described is exactly that. Do you think, or have you ever considered that maybe some, I by no means am trying to scare you or anything, but if you thought that maybe something has latched on to you?
I've considered it, but I've never felt that, because I've never felt the same presence twice.
Oh.
Ever.
That's interesting.
So maybe you're just a beacon. The things...
Yeah, it's like maybe once something realizes that I'm aware, then
Yeah.
it's like a flashlight goes on. It's like, oh, she knows.
She's
knows.
tuned to the same frequency.
Yeah, and then they all start crawling out of the woodworks.
But that is interesting. If with that mentality, that would seem to say that if a thing, and for lack of a better word, a thing, saw that you could see, you think of the old lady, I would think that they would probably seek you out again. You know, that experience, knowing that you can see them, and be like, I need to get this person to understand.
I have no idea how it works, or if there even is anything out there. I just know I've had weird things happen, and when I've moved, it's never been just from one neighborhood to another in the same location. I'm moving states and states away. I don't know if they're stuck to their locations, or if they can hitch a ride, or if they're stuck to a specific person. I have no idea how it works. I just know that I've never experienced the same one twice.
So one quick question. What was the first one?
The first one happened in my childhood home. I was about my son's age. He's 7.
Okay.
And I remember looking out the back window, because that Christmas we had gotten a trampoline.
Yeah.
And I loved my trampoline.
Okay.
And I love to look out there and just like, I wonder what I can do later.
Yeah.
Well, I look out once, and there is a girl standing in my backyard. And she's a little girl. She looks like she's about the same age as me.
Okay.
She's all gray. At least the tone of her was. Her clothes, her hair. It's like the color had been drained from her.
Okay.
And she was wearing a very old style dress. I would say Victorian style dress.
Okay.
Her hair was very intricate, ringlets and a big poofy bow in the back.
Right.
I could even see the edges of the bow sticking out from either side of her head. And she was just staring at the house. And I saw her...
Did you see her feet?
I did see her feet.
Interesting.
Out of curiosity, Joe, it's the second time you've asked that. What's the reason?
What's with the feet?
Oh, yeah, I know. I swear I don't have a foot fetish.
Do you have a thing?
No fetishes. No, the reason I ask is because a long time ago I was reading a novel, and it's one of these technically fiction novels, but they include some sort of, I guess you could call it pseudoscience, where they quote a variety of different things attributed to the study of the paranormal. One of the things that they quoted was the fact that sometimes when you observe particularly apparitions, usually you will not be able to see their feet. So whenever you're looking at something that could be considered a spirit or a ghost, you would be able to see pretty much everything except for their feet. So you would.
I saw her feet. She had these really cute little
interesting
shoes with little, like little boots almost, with a buckle on the front.
Do you know how old the property where you were living at was?
I don't. It was rented. We were just renting. However, in the backyard of that house, there was for lack of better words, we always called it the Playhouse.
Yeah.
It was a very old,
It's a very
falling
creepy
apart.
name.
It is
Yeah.
pretty creepy.
we were never allowed to go in there because like the floor was rotted through,
Okay.
and it looked like a good spot for snakes to
Okay. Yeah.
roost in. And
Right.
so we were never allowed to go in there, but it was very old. When we looked through the windows,
Yeah.
we could see really old, well, like school furniture, like very
wow.
old desks,
Oh.
and yeah, it was, and like lanterns, and
That's really
one
awesome.
of those weird old stoves in the corner.
Yeah, heating stoves, like those
Yeah.
cast iron ones.
Yeah, super old.
Nice.
But we were never allowed in there because the floor was unstable.
Okay.
And I always kind of wanted to go in there
Yeah.
just because it looked so neat, but I never would have disobeyed my mother.
Yeah. So you think maybe the 1800s, something around those lines?
Maybe.
Okay.
I did see her feet.
Okay.
But she's the only one I ever really looked.
Interesting.
Also,
Did she look back?
That's a good question.
she was looking at the house. I looked at her.
But did she ever lock eyes?
I don't think so. I don't know. She just looked very out of place.
Okay.
And my yard was a fenced-in backyard. There
Okay.
was no way she could have gotten in. You know, she couldn't have climbed the fence. She couldn't. There were no gates. And in fact, we lived next door to a supermarket.
Okay.
So it was a parking lot on the other side. And
So a busy area.
sometimes, yeah. But it wasn't in a very wealthy area either.
Okay.
And it's not one you'd go gallivanting through with pretty clothes on, like she had on.
Okay.
Especially by yourself.
Right. Especially at that time, right?
Yeah.
For a young
yeah,
person.
definitely not. So she looked very out of place.
Okay.
And that's why I remember her still to this day. I am now 34.
Yeah.
And I remember this girl.
Very vividly.
Never spoke. Never spoke. But I remember that was the first time I was like, huh, that's really weird. I didn't feel afraid of her, though. Maybe because I was so young. And maybe because she looked like she was my age. But I actually read somewhere that maybe things that are really, really bad sometimes take on the forms of children
Yeah.
to make you comfortable.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I only saw her the once.
But you never sense any malice, right?
No, not from her.
Yeah.
But maybe, I mean, I was really young. Maybe I just didn't know what
The
that felt
innocence.
like.
Yeah.
Really.
That makes sense.
Because up to that point in my life, no one had ever wanted to hurt me.
Yeah.
So,
So
how would I recognize it?
Right.
throughout this conversation, I keep making reference to your namesake and the purpose that she had. Now, I happen to know from conversation with you that one of your experiences involved something that was very clearly not from our reality.
Oh, do tell.
So I'm going to let her tell the story,
okay.
obviously. But in specific, I'm referring
big
to
guy?
the big guy.
Oh, that one.
So, Joe, one of the questions I had asked her previously is, do you feel like these are kind of asking for your help? This story here, so the imp story that she gave me made me start thinking, well, that's clearly not looking for help to get
No.
across any bridge.
That just felt like it was watching creepily.
So this next thing that she told me about inspired some of my story writing.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating thing, and I'm fascinated, again, overusing that word possibly, but I'm entertained by the idea of what she's going to tell you, this creature, and I'm curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah.
Take it away.
So this one, I again was asleep.
Uh-huh.
Woke up out of a dead sleep. Behind me, right behind my head, was a very large window.
Okay.
Lots of light coming in here.
Okay.
And right outside that window was a neighbor who had a very bright porch light. So, I mean, this was well illuminated. And we had no curtains on this window.
Okay.
So, light, just
Yep.
putting that down.
Yep.
And I wasn't alone this time. There was someone sleeping next to me.
Oh, gotcha.
So, I wake up again because something is wrong. I feel wrong.
Yeah.
And
So definitely malice in the air.
definitely.
Okay.
I woke up and felt immediately afraid.
All right.
This was goosebumps all over and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
So your body's automatically kicking into fight or flight mode.
immediately kicking into, okay, this is bad.
Okay.
Something's really bad.
Okay.
I sit up. I'm looking down at just observing the room, and you can't miss it. Standing at the foot of the bed is this giant of a man.
Yeah.
I call it a man just because it didn't look female, but I can't say it was really a man in the human sense of the word either. It was very large, very muscular, but not in any sort of symmetrical way. Like it was lumpy.
Oh.
And it had a little head. Little head.
So the imagery that she gave me initially made me think, she's going down this road now, I think, made me think of a really tall hunchback.
Yes, that's where I was getting to. Like its head was very small and low set.
Okay.
Because behind its head and up above its head, I could see what appeared to be this lump or hunch on its back.
Right. I was imagining like the Elephant Man, like somebody that with that type of disorder or something like that.
No, this was, I don't even know. It was like he was just put together wrong. There was no symmetry whatsoever.
How tall was it?
Hard to say.
Obviously, you were laying down. So.
I was laying down. I'm thinking of the bookshelf that was next to it. Maybe 6.5, 7 feet.
That's
Maybe
tall.
even a little taller with the hunch.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking from
Right,
its head was. And its arms were all lopsided, and
Oh, man.
it was just. Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine.
It was just facing me,
Yeah.
and because it was so well lit, I could see this thing. I could see it.
And did it lock eyes?
Yes,
Oh.
very much so.
Oh no.
And
you felt threatened?
100%. Like this was going to be the last moments of my life, and
Did you
I was
sense-
going to die to this thing.
Oh, so
Whatever it was.
I was about to ask you, did you sense any intentions? I think you just answered that.
That
This
seems
thing
pretty clear, yeah.
had the most menacing look on its face. I could picture like a snarl,
Okay.
almost,
Okay.
and just pure hatred in its face.
Where was this again?
In my bedroom.
No, but like in a general area.
Colorado.
Oh, intro.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there's a
Remember
lot
those
of
apartments?
right.
Yeah, that's the one.
There's a lot of stories in Colorado.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
And that was one of the first experience I'd actually had here.
Oh,
So
wow.
this is an image.
Very similar.
Oh
This
my
is
God.
the image of what she gave to me.
Yeah, I would probably use what he said, a Christmas tree as a nightlight for the rest of my life.
It was horrible. I freaked out. And I think I remember I woke up the person sleeping next to me,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. And of course he had to calm me down
Yeah.
because I was completely beside myself.
Okay.
And it stayed there for a little bit until I started to really freak out and started slamming the person next to me.
Yeah.
Then it was gone. Like it didn't want to be seen by multiple people.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the person you were with didn't see it.
No.
Did the feeling immediately go away?
Yes and no. Like the feeling it left me with obviously lingered for quite some time. But that feeling in the air of catastrophe, chaos, that immediately vanished.
Wow.
Once it did.
So I'm curious as to one thing, because a lot of the times you've mentioned the fact that you've been sleeping. So there's, I don't know if I think you might know about this. So you ever heard of dimethyltryptamine?
Dimethyltryptamine.
Yeah, DMT. The reason I mention it is because DMT is something that's considered to be a psychotropic. So it's, if you synthesize it, you can make a drug, a very powerful hallucinogenic drug, which is a component to what some people find in South America called ayahuasca. But also it's something that we in our bodies naturally produce. So what I mean by this is your brain, your pineal gland specifically, has the ability to produce DMT. So you produce dimethyltryptamine specifically at the moment of your death, sometimes when you're sleeping, which can be attributed to very intense lucid dreams. The pineal gland also excretes melatonin. Melatonin is another component that allows you to have very vivid dreams. Apart from that, your lungs can also produce DMT. So the reason why I've asked is a lot of the times when you mention all these situations, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that they're not real. It's just that there's a lot of schools of thought that say that underneath the, the influence of this substance, people have very similar accounts. So in other words, if you take a group of 10,000 people who have been underneath this substance, you'll see that almost all of them see the same thing.
That's weird.
Yeah. And a lot of the times they have these very intricate and very ornate, detailed situations where they have a presence that presents themselves in colors and a bunch of other stuff. But the point of the whole thing I'm asking is, have you ever had any problems with your lungs?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I have.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know if this matters or not, but the problem I had with my lungs was not until after my son was born. So a lot of these things happened before the lung problems.
Okay. And again, not trying to
No,
discredit
no.
anything.
I
I'm
hope
just...
it's not real.
No. So
The thought that these things exist
Yes.
on maybe just another plane, like they're right on top of us, but we can't see them, that's horrifying.
So for me,
I would never want that to be real.
I was gonna tell you, like in my school of thought in regards to this, I don't think I am not like Charles. I basically have an idea where I would never say as an absolute that something is either real or not real, right? So what I mean by that is I do not believe that it's correct to say absolutely either God is real or absolutely God is not real. So in the same way, I believe attributes to ghosts, paranormal, things like that. I can never say something like that is absolutely not real, but I can also say that it's absolutely real. So by that I mean, if at any time we see these types of situations, I try to find some logic in it. And at the same time, you can correlate that with all the experiences that people had underneath these different hallucinogenic substances. And what you mentioned right there, I think, is probably more of attuned to what I would believe that what you're really seeing. Maybe what you're seeing is something that resides in a different frequency, something that we cannot see with our naked eyes, something that is not for everybody to observe unless they have some specific, I wouldn't say gift, I would say... I guess sensitivity, maybe. That's a better idea. I think some people can be more sensitive to this naturally. Others need to have help.
Do you think it has anything to do with possible like near-death experiences? Like
Yeah.
maybe that sort of...
Well, there's a lot of correlations with people that have near-death experiences and having more, how do you say, I wouldn't say sensitive in this case. I would say open. I think they're more open to receiving, I don't know what to call them. What would you call them, Bo?
It's interesting to hear that because you had said a moment ago that you had this sensation where, or not sensation, but you had this mindset that you were essentially saying that you don't believe them per se, but you don't not believe them. I'm paraphrasing, mind you. But for me, it's very similar. Like I hear people like her. She tells us this story,
Right.
and I can see it in her eyes that this is really what she experienced.
Right.
For me, though, when I hear these stories like yourself, I try to put logic to it.
Right.
And I want, realistically, I'm Fox Mulder. I want to believe.
Wait, does that mean I'm Scully?
I mean, you kind of are.
That's awesome.
Because Scully was of that show, right? Scully was always the scientific one.
The skeptic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She was the skeptic. I'm more the skeptic.
So
but
so we're hybrids. That's fine.
yeah, okay, fair enough.
There's
Fair
a little bit of you and me, and oh wait,
Yeah,
keep going.
I don't like that idea, so we'll just keep going.
Joe's like the lone gunman and Scully mixed together. Like
Yes.
he totally is on board with this, but at the same time he tries to debunk it too.
yes, I like it. I like
Well,
that.
that's
Yep.
pretty good.
Yep, cool.
Then I don't know. Maybe I'm not even on that show.
No,
They
what are you
are.
talking about? You're definitely a Mulder.
There's nobody on that show.
You want
that's...
to believe, but you're like Skinner, their boss.
Exactly. You're like Mulder / Skinner had a baby.
I think we're derailing.
A
I
little
think
bit.
that is a frightening thought. All
Well,
right,
I mean,
so-
okay.
No, if these things are like, I hope they're not real.
Yeah.
I have no evidence to, like, I've never, oh, this is creepy, snap a picture. It's never happened that way. It's always
Right.
very quick. And so, however, I do have one that happened that actually involved another living creature, if you want to hear that.
Yeah.
Let's hear that one. That
Okay,
sounds
so
interesting.
when I was in high school, my junior year of high school, I had surgery on my back. I was bedridden for the entire summer between my junior and senior years of high school.
Okay.
And I had a cat. Sweet kitty, miss him dearly. But I was recovering in my bed. My mom was at work.
Okay.
So I was home alone, with the exception of the cat this time.
Yeah.
I hadn't been asleep. I wasn't under the effects of any medication.
Yep.
Whether it be anything for pain or antibiotics.
Yep.
I was well into the recovery phase, but I was still where I was crawling everywhere around the house.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time laying in bed and doing crossword puzzles and things like that. So I'm laying in bed. I'm expecting my aunt to come over later to help me with wound care because I left a very nasty wound that had to heal on its own with no stitches. So I was expecting my aunt at some point around noon to come and help me with wound care. And so I'm laying there, and I hear my cat suddenly out in the hallway. I'm behind a shut door in the bedroom. My cat, we weren't letting him in because we were worried about contamination with cat hair and things in the wound.
Right.
So suddenly I'm laying there and I'm doing my crossword puzzle, and I hear him suddenly in the hallway, and he's losing his mind.
Okay.
He is howling and hissing and spitting, and
wow.
Generally sounds like a cornered cat.
Okay. So they're about to get into some fights.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, and I think my aunt is here. Maybe he just doesn't know her, and so he's freaking out.
Okay.
I've never seen him do this before, but maybe he just really doesn't like her for some reason.
Yeah.
So I call out to her, and no one answers me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, she just didn't hear me. The cat's throwing a fit. He's super loud. I'll just wait for her to come in. She knows where I am. And I'm laying there, and I put my books to the side, and I put my arms up behind my head, and I see the doorknob turn. And I say, come on in. And
whoa,
the door cracks open, and it is not my aunt. It's not even what I would call a person.
Okay.
Like, no one's broken in.
Yeah.
So this was daytime around 11:30, 11:40 in the morning.
Okay.
Very sunny day. We had like skylight windows in our house then, and so tons of sunlight pouring through. Everything was perfectly lit, and suddenly I'm glancing down. I'm facing the door, and I'm looking in the crack, trying to figure out who's there. And there's this little creature. It's all black.
Yeah.
It is no taller than about the doorknob.
Wow.
Like, it's actually lifting up its arm to touch the doorknob.
Yeah.
And it cracks the door open several inches, and I can see this bright, shiny eye. Just one. Like, it's just peeking through like this. And I cannot see below where its head is, so it's filtering out the light. It's definitely, something's there, blocking all the sunlight. And I can see all the light above it. So it's something very clearly there.
Yep.
And I can see this shiny, bright eye. It almost looked like a flashlight coming out of this thing's face.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Okay. Yeah.
And I slowly sit up and I say, who are you? Who are you?
Yep.
Get out. Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
And my cat, he's still losing his mind out in the hallway. And this thing just glances at me, and then it backs up and pulls the door shut. I see the doorknob turn again, and then it's gone. Wow. It never enters the room. It just opens the door like to peek in to see what's up. And after a few minutes, my cat becomes calm.
Okay.
He hides under the bed for the next 2 days.
Wow.
In another bedroom, but he stopped howling and throwing a fit. I told my mother about it. We had several creepy things happen in that house.
Yeah.
But that was one of the creepiest.
Did the cat mark the territory after? Was he urinating?
He was very jumpy.
Okay.
And this was a cat that had previously been pretty comfortable in the home.
Okay.
My brother's friends would occasionally come in, and they all had dogs, so he didn't like the smell of the dogs on him, but he was a very chill cat otherwise. This was the first time and only time I'd ever seen him freak out.
Right.
And he sounded like a wild animal out in the hallway.
So this is the second time you've mentioned something that looks to be an anthropomorphized creature.
I could see no features on this thing other than the fact that it was about the size of a child.
Yeah.
And it was all black. All black. No features. It was just as black as your shirt.
But you saw the two eyes.
I saw one eye.
Oh, one eye.
Because it was just peeking in the door like this.
Any shadow? Like, did it cast a shadow?
I couldn't see behind it.
Even. Okay, right. Okay, it was just a single crack, right? You can't see.
Yeah, it was just a couple inches wide, and I could see this thing, and I just saw one bright eye with no features other than, like, light coming from the eye.
Okay.
I don't have any clue what that was.
Yeah.
I don't have a clue. I've never seen anything even remotely resembling that ever since. I can't even call it a shadow person because it didn't behave like a shadow person.
Yeah.
And this thing opened the door.
Yeah, that's definitely not, yeah.
So, I'm curious. So, one of the guys who's in ghost culture right now, who's real famous, is Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures.
Yeah.
And when he first started his series of Ghost Adventures, he used to do this thing where he would call out a spirit, or he would say, you pushing women, you're slapping people, come push me, come slap me, you're a punk, you're this, and he would actively call it out to try and antagonize it. That was one of the things for me that appealed to me, as I was like, that's exactly what I would do if I was in that kind of situation. That's
right.
I would be that person who would say, hey, I want to believe, so make it happen. Say what you got to say. Do what you got to do. Push, scratch.
So you remember a long time ago when we were talking about Solomon and the Testament of Solomon?
I try not to think about it.
Well, so one of the things that you can find in the Testament of Solomon is that every single time he's addressing one of the demons, he calls them out. He basically forces them to tell him not just their name, which is a very important thing, by the way,
that part,
but also what they do, what their antithesis. Help me out here. How do you say that?
You said it right.
Antithesis. Like basically what mostly they hate. But what's interesting about it is if you go in throughout all the cultures to talk about this thing, they say always the same thing. Call them out and find out their name. Once you have their name, you basically gain power over them. Yeah.
Well, what I was trying to segue to is, have you ever thought, like when you start getting those vibes that somebody's there and you look around and you don't see anything, have you ever thought about trying to talk to it?
No, never once.
Was there a reason why you wouldn't do that?
I don't want, if these things are there, I don't want them to know that I know they're there. Does that make sense?
Well, but
I don't want to address it because I feel like it would make it worse.
I mean, if somebody's standing at the side of your bed and you scream and launch yourself, haven't you kind of told them?
Maybe. Maybe I have, but I would never think to sit and just try to carry on a conversation with one. That one I only spoke to because I thought it was my aunt at first.
Yeah.
And then when I realized it wasn't her, is it a neighborhood kid who's wandered in?
Yeah.
But then when I saw it,
nope.
No, it's definitely nobody I know.
So we're coming to the bottom of the hour, and we've heard a lot of these stories.
Yes.
One of the things I am curious about, you said you don't know, but I'd like to hear a speculation from you. Mm-hmm. What do you think is happening? Do you think that you're seeing into another world, or do you think
good question
that these people are seeking you out? I'm curious as to what you really feel.
Several people know I've had experiences like these, and I've gotten everything from, well, yes, it's just one of those things in that movie. What is it called? The Sixth Sense, where they're trying to talk to you, they want help,
right?
Or I've gotten, you just don't go to church enough. I've gotten both. And
that's a very Southern response.
It's not something I would typically talk to people about because of the judgmental nature of most individuals.
The stigma type.
I think a lot of people tend to think you probably are not like educated or that you have some sort of damage.
Not so much that as I'd be worried they think I'm attention seeking.
Oh.
And I don't want attention.
No, of all the people I've met, you want the least amount of attention of anybody I've ever met.
Well, that's even more interesting, right? Because look, if you combine that with the fact of how much attention like that you're getting, that's even
I try
weirder.
to hide from most people and things.
To be fair, we almost had to twist her arm to get her to come on the show tonight.
Yep.
She didn't want... I don't know. Is it that you didn't want to acknowledge it and make it real?
No, just nervousness in talking to people because I'm not great at socializing.
No, it's been fine.
There's a lot of people, and some of our listeners even, who've gone through unusual things like what you've experienced. And I think you sharing this with them empowers them to feel not alone.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's somewhere it's going to empower somebody to speak to somebody else about it.
Yeah, which is very important, by the way.
Absolutely.
I mean, you could never go to a medical professional with this because then they think you're having hallucinations and you definitely have some things going on upstairs.
I would agree.
So I would never... You can't seek help from anybody about this, even if you wanted it.
So, yeah, most of the times if you go to a therapist or a psychologist, they would consider some of it being psychosomatic, some of it being archetypical stories that are being presented to you because of some trauma or some outside source, which is causing you some subconscious or maybe even hidden, or you could say... well, like in a traumatic experience. Like if I was a psychologist sitting right next to you after all you told me all this, I would
You
say,
are.
well, okay, but if I was looking at this as a psychologist, right, I would ask you whether or not this is tied to anything that you faced in your childhood, whether or not this is something that was triggered, and a bunch of other questions.
It's very Freudian of you.
Right, but yes, I would much rather be in the realm of Jung, which he would see it as an archetypical story that you're trying to anthropomorphize either some inlaid fear or trying to take something outside of your subconscious. And the way that it's being presented to you is by these random visitations of things that are coming in and out of your life and persisted throughout your life, irregardless of where you are. So it's something that you have in your subconscious that you have yet to face. Like that, if I was a psychologist going about this thing, but I'm not. I'm really curious about it, realistically, because I think that we have too much of an absolute when we think of things strictly in the manner of again, as a scientist, quote unquote. Really, I'm more interested in the fact of what makes how you feel about it. Because if you feel, especially when you said most of these are not malicious, so if they're not malicious, then the whole idea or concept of just being tied to some type of trauma would be wrong.
Well, the interesting thing is, you know, you hear these stories on TV, and even from others, they talked about being scratched or slapped or pushed. Not one has ever tried to touch me.
Yeah.
I've never actually seen them move. They're always stationary.
Interesting.
Except for the one that opened the door. And even that one, I didn't feel malice from it. It's just curiosity.
But
more than anything.
But that one intervened in your physical realm.
Yes, it did. And
so that's actually a really good question. You said that none of these have ever moved.
Except for that one.
What about, excluding that one, have they blinked their eyes? Did you see their chest go up and down with breath?
I don't think so, now that I think about it.
So
maybe they don't need to breathe where they are, or if they're not real at all, I don't see why they would. I don't know. But nothing's ever tried to make physical contact with me as a person. Now, I can't say what would have happened if I'd never noticed these things. Maybe there's plenty that I don't notice. And
oh wait, really important question. Have you ever played around with how do you say it?
Ouija board?
Ouija, thank you.
No,
Ouija?
I have not.
Ouija?
Actually, I've mentioned this to her in the past, and I'm not trying to speak for you, but you sound like you're intimidated by a Ouija board.
I'm not. I know it's a toy made by a toy company, but still, I'm not going to entertain it. So even if there is something to it.
Why is that?
Just, I don't want to tinker with things I don't know enough about.
I see.
And it seems if that is a real thing, then just the spiritual world at large, it's much bigger than me, and I don't want to dabble in things I'm not an expert on.
To give our listeners a little bit more perspective about how you think and how you feel, you are not a big movie fan.
No.
And you do read a lot of books. So I'm curious, can you tell the folks at home, like, give us an example of a horror movie that really bothered you, if any exist, and then give us an example of a book that bothered you in the same way.
A book. I'm trying to remember the name of it. This one, I think, actually might have been by Stephen King, but it's something about like a house and then Rose Red. It's like the Winchester house. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's actually called Rose Red.
Rose Red.
Yeah, that one. That one kind of
it's a creepy
unnerved me just because it wasn't so obvious in its attempts to be scary.
Yeah.
Most of the things that happened in the book were very subtle, which to me is more how it is.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have things just running up in your face and trying to smack you around.
Right.
It's just always you see it.
Well,
it's
Joe does.
The corner of your eye.
In his daily life.
That's a different situation, all right.
To be fair, that's just how I know to greet you. I'm sorry, continue.
And then a movie.
Have you ever seen a movie that really scared you?
You should see The Haunting on Hill House. If you like Rose Red.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's actually pretty good. It's remade from an old Vincent Price movie.
I've never had a movie that just scared me to where I couldn't sleep at night. Because to me, none of them really get it right.
Okay.
At least anywhere close to my experiences.
So do you have any phobias?
Snakes and heights.
So I'm asking because I want to see if I can correlate these to any of your experiences. Heights obviously doesn't seem like you've had any visions of that. What about snakes? Do you ever see shadow snakes, or do you ever have?
I dream about snakes frequently, but I've never. They've never resembled any of the things I've seen, the ghoulies, so to speak.
Okay.
But I have nightmares about snakes all the time.
I mean, that makes sense. If you have a phobia, it makes sense. Right. Now, Joe, the reason, the line of this questioning was to try and establish what you said, some sort of correlation to something that may be going on in her psyche. Yep. But it doesn't appear that there is one.
That's exactly my point. So even if it was tied to something subconscious that's deeply hidden, we would already see a pattern.
I agree.
Right? And realistically, I don't see one there. And I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you by any means. I'm really just thinking, if and when you observe these things, the interesting thing for me is that you did not face something that's menacing, and even within the realm of reason, maybe, and just maybe, if this keeps happening throughout your life, would you ever think of seeking it out? And by seeking it out, I mean going to some place that you know has a history of being haunted.
Oh, that's a really good question.
I actually have.
Oh, really?
I have. I've been to several graveyards at night.
Yeah.
Just because someone I was with knew that I've had experiences in the past.
Yeah. Did you see anything?
I was very creeped out, and it's hard to say because there were far off lights.
Yeah.
And lots of trees around and shadows, and things can look really weird at night.
Well, that and your mind, the adrenaline helps play.
So I can't say that I saw anything in these graveyards. However, that house that I told you about, where I saw that little short thing that opened the door, my mom, she would go around sometimes and just snap pictures with a digital camera.
Yeah.
And my room seemed to be a hangout for, I guess we would call them orbs.
Oh, yeah.
And they were
orbs, bro.
Orbs, bro, exactly. But these were very clearly those. They weren't bugs, not lint.
Yeah.
Very bright, circular. Yeah. And they would hang out in my room, and they would tend to gravitate around me.
Yeah.
I'd have a lot around me. Or even once I had one that was kind of just sitting here.
Any colors?
They were white.
Okay.
All white.
Okay.
So, I don't know. It's just weird things. I was so happy when I moved out of that house.
But you've actively seeked it out.
Kind of.
Yeah, because if you went to a graveyard willingly, right?
I did.
What about going to some place a little bit more nefarious? Maybe going to some place like, I don't know, the Stanley Hotel.
I would see Stanley Hotel, as I understand it, and that's local to Colorado.
Yeah.
As I understand it, only has like one or two areas that's really bad, and I think you have to it would be a great experience. So we do have Joe and I have this idea that we want to do some special podcasts. Like for Halloween, we would like to broadcast live from somewhere creepy, like the Stanley.
Yep.
How would you feel about showing up again on the show? Since you're a little more sensitive than clearly I am, for sure.
Yeah.
Would that bother you to potentially be surrounded, in an environment where, for lack of a better term, the ghoulies are more likely to appear?
No, I don't. No, because anywhere I am it seems somewhere they're more likely to appear.
Okay. So, and also you'd mentioned that it takes a while for them to show up, so I wonder if that would even do any good.
I don't know. Someplace I kind of always wanted to visit in the past was, it was in Louisville. It was the...
Louisville, Kentucky?
Yeah, Louisville, Kentucky.
You're talking about the crazy house, or not the crazy house, it's where all the bronchitis, tuberculosis, there you go.
I can't remember the name of it.
I know of it, but I can't remember the name.
That just...
like every ghost show on TV has been there at one time or another.
Sure.
And so that's usually one of their more creepy episodes. I think it'd be awesome to go there. But
so, and I'm sorry to break in here, but I'm curious to see the thought of both of you in regards to what some people claim as underlined energy, specifically Bo, because I know he's a very strict non-believer. There's this idea for the listeners who don't know that places like this hospital that she's mentioning,
Waverly Hills.
Oh,
that's
there
the
you
one.
go. Okay,
Yeah.
so Waverly Hills. So there's ideas that when places like this have so much, I would call bad energy or just energy of people passing away, dying, suffering. There's an echo. So what are your thoughts on that belief that sometimes places as that Waverly place?
So before you, that's a really good question, and before you answer that, I want to segue with a separate question that I think is really going to modify your answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
And feel free to say that you're not comfortable with answering, but would you say that you are a religious person?
Not at all.
So, do you believe in an afterlife?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because the things that I have experienced and seen, part of me would have to say yes, because otherwise where would they come from?
Right.
Sure.
Unless it's some other dimensional type thing.
Well, I think back to the hunchback thing that you mentioned and the gargoyle thing. Like, those clearly seem inhuman.
Right, but then there's the one with my dad.
And that's true. That is true.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, part of me wants to say yes just because of the things I've experienced, and then part of me is like, it's not possible.
Well, I mean, let's
So-
jump into physics here, right? I mean, if you think of the second law of thermodynamics, energy can either be created or destroyed. It has to be transformed. So if we just stick with physics, then technically, there has to be some way, shape, or form of an afterlife.
So the energy that is in a person has to turn or
Transform.
change into something when you die.
So the truth to that, though, and we're going to segue off of that because I think that's a much different conversation. But I think scientists have already explained that while what you said is true, the thermodynamics of energy and all that, that's true. But there's a lot of people have this misinformation about how if you are like when you die, you're made of energy, and when you die, your energy has to go somewhere. Like people say that all the time.
Yeah.
Well, the truth is that when you die, like your energy is contained inside your body, and when you biodegrade, for lack of a better word, that's where your energy's going, is back into the soil and into the plants.
Right, but what about your information?
Well, and see, you and I, we disagree on that.
Well, but wait, so let's shelve that.
You're right. You're right. Sorry, folks. We're trying to keep it wrangled. So, to answer Joe's question, or to think more about what he said, do you think that places can have such negative experiences? Take one of the concentration camps.
Oh my God.
I have visited one of those in the past, and it's absolutely harrowing. Like, my hair stood on end the whole time. Do you feel like a place like that can hold a memory?
I've heard of, they call them, what is it, residual energy, or ghosts that don't seem like they're aware that they're even there. It's like playback.
Yeah, like an echo.
Yeah.
Like it echoes
Is
and
that
it
what
keeps
you're referring
going.
to?
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Like it repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats.
just
Something played out basically forever.
I hope not.
Yeah, me neither. That's.
I certainly hope not. Because it's like, what's the point if that's what you're stuck in forever?
I mean, that's just the closest I could come to hell.
That
really.
would be
Absolutely
horrible.
Yeah.
So we're at the bottom of our time, and I'm curious. You've had a lot of these experiences. You've been through clearly a lot. Do you have any advice for people who are listening, who might be listening, who've been through what you've been through? Do you have any advice, or do you have, something that you want to share with them?
For what it's worth, I don't think you're crazy, even if other people might. I don't know if that's worth anything, though.
No, it is.
It can mean the world to somebody. Absolutely.
Maybe so. There's always somebody to talk to. I've been fortunate in these two, Bo and Joe, and they're always willing to listen. And I know there's other people out there too. And maybe seek out. I'm sure there's forums of people who have issues like this. If you really need somebody to talk to, you can find allies out there that will listen to what you have to say and believe you. And maybe just that act is enough to make it go away. Maybe just for you, maybe it's enough to make the fear disappear.
That's great. I hope our listeners, when you hear these words, I hope you realize exactly what she said. The Bo and Joe show, we're here. You can talk to us. You can hit us up in the comments. You can send us emails. We'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. And if any of you ever entertain the idea of sharing your story with us, we can, of course, potentially have some of our listeners come on the show, tell us their stories.
Absolutely.
Obviously, Kara-Ann is one of our listeners, and she's willing to come on and talk to us. So thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Yeah,
You
thank you
are
very
welcome.
much.
Thank you both.
Well, folks at home, if you have additional conversation topics for us, or if you just want to comment about this, you can do so in the section below. Or you can always send us an email at boandjoepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening tonight. As always, I'm Bo.
I'm Joe.
And we'll see you guys next time.
And I'm gonna